Iran just found out the hard way that one old, ugly, slow-flying plane can do more damage than $100 million of failed missiles ever could. Iran just found out the hard way that one old, ugly, slow-flying plane can do more damage than $100 million of failed missiles ever could. Late last night, IRGC forces launched a wave of ballistic missiles at American positions in the Middle East. This was not a warning shot. This was not some symbolic gesture meant to save face back home. This was a real attempt to hit American troops and American equipment where it hurts, and it failed completely. Every single missile in that wave was tracked, targeted, and destroyed before it ever reached its target. Patriot batteries and Navy defense systems worked exactly the way they were built to work. Not one American was hurt. Not one piece of American equipment was damaged. Iran spent a massive amount of money on a strike that accomplished absolutely nothing, except making its own military look weaker on the world stage. But here is where the story actually gets interesting, because America's response did not start with words. It started with a photo. Before any official statement came out, before any press conference, before any angry tweet from anyone in Washington, Central Command quietly posted a single image online. It was a picture of the A-10 Warthog sitting on a runway, fueled up and ready to go. No caption full of threats, no long paragraph explaining strategy, just a photo. And people who understand how this game works knew exactly what that photo meant. It meant the message had already been sent, and it did not need any extra words attached to it. In modern warfare, sometimes the loudest statement is the one that says nothing at all. For people who do not follow military aircraft closely, the A-10 might not sound like a big deal. It is not sleek. It is not fast. It does not look like something out of a movie. But ask anyone who has served on the ground and needed air support, and they will tell you this plane is one of the most feared aircraft in the sky, and for very specific reasons that we are going to get into later in this video. What matters right now is the timing. Iran launched its missiles hoping to catch American forces off guard, hoping to create chaos, hoping to force some kind of panicked reaction. Instead, the response was calm, calculated, and already moving before Iran even realized what was coming next. That single photo of the Warthog was not just symbolism. It was a signal that a real strike package was already being prepared, and within hours, that strike package was in the air. Reports coming out of the region describe multiple sorties launching from bases across the area, targeting IRGC-linked positions and militia infrastructure that Iran uses to carry out these kinds of attacks without directly putting its own uniforms on the front line. This is an important detail because Iran has spent years trying to keep its hands clean by using proxy groups to do its dirty work. That strategy depends on those proxy networks staying protected and staying supplied. The moment American aircraft start hitting those supply lines directly, that entire strategy starts falling apart in real time. What makes this moment different from previous rounds of tension is the speed of the response and the choice of aircraft. Nobody expected the A-10 to be the star of this story. Everyone expected fighter jets, missile strikes, maybe a big flashy show of force with stealth aircraft. Instead, the United States chose a plane that has been flying since the Cold War, a plane that Congress has tried to retire more than once, and a plane that keeps proving every single time that no replacement has matched what it does best. So while the headlines focus on the failed Iranian missile attack, the real story is what came right after it. A slow, heavily armored, incredibly dangerous aircraft was already moving into position before most people even knew the missiles had been fired. And what that aircraft was about to do next is where this entire situation takes a much more serious turn, which is exactly what we are going to break down in the next section. Picture a plane that was built around its gun instead of the other way around. That is not an exaggeration. That is literally how the A-10 was designed, and that single fact tells you everything you need to know about why this aircraft was chosen for this exact moment. Most fighter jets are built first, then a weapon gets added to fit the frame. The A-10 flipped that whole idea on its head. Engineers built the GAU-8 Avenger cannon first, a massive rotating gun that fires almost 4,000 rounds a minute, and then they built an entire airplane around that gun just to carry it into battle. The result is a plane that does not look elegant, does not look modern, and honestly, does not look like much of anything special sitting on a runway. But once it is in the air doing its job, there is nothing else quite like it. Within hours of that Warthog photo going out, multiple A-10 sorties were reported moving into the region, working alongside support aircraft to hit targets tied directly to IRGC operations and the militia networks Iran uses to avoid direct blame. This was not a random bombing run. This was a focused, patient strike against supply depots, staging areas, and logistics sites, the exact kind of ground-level targets that fast jets and long-range missiles often struggle to handle cleanly. Here is why the Warthog matters so much in this specific situation. Fighter jets are built for speed, for high-altitude combat, for quick strikes and quick exits. The A-10 was built for something completely different. It is built to loiter. It can circle over a target area for hours, watching, waiting, adjusting, and striking exactly when the moment is right. That kind of patience is priceless when you're hunting scattered targets like mobile weapons caches or militia staging points that do not always sit still. Then there's the armor. The A-10 has a titanium shell around the cockpit, often called the bathtub, thick enough that the pilot can survive hits that would bring down almost any other aircraft. This plane has flown home missing chunks of its wing. It has taken direct hits and kept flying. That kind of survivability lets it fly low and slow over dangerous ground, exactly where it needs to be to hit these kinds of targets accurately, without the pilot needing to worry about every single shot fired up from the ground. Reports out of the strike zone describe targets including weapon storage sites, drone staging locations, and logistics hubs used to funnel supplies to Iran-backed militias operating across the region. This lines up with a pattern that has been building for months. IRGC-directed attacks on American positions have been climbing steadily, with some reports pointing to more than 30 drone attacks in just a matter of days before this latest missile launch. This was not one isolated incident. This was the breaking point of a much longer pattern of harassment. What makes this strike package especially effective is that it was not the A-10 flying alone. Support aircraft handled air defense suppression first, clearing safe lanes through Iranian and militia radar coverage before the Warthogs ever moved in. Other aircraft handled overhead protection, watching for any attempt to intercept the strike force. This is layered warfare, each aircraft doing one job so the Warthog could do its job without distraction. The message behind choosing this aircraft goes beyond firepower. It is almost symbolic. Sending in the A-10, a plane everyone in Washington has tried to retire for 20 years, a plane that keeps getting saved by Congress every single time, sends its own kind of statement. It says that no matter how much newer technology gets developed, some tools simply cannot be replaced, and some threats still need the oldest, most brutal solution available. Iran was likely expecting a flashy show of stealth jets and long-range missiles. Instead, it got hit by a plane built during the Cold War that still does its job better than anything meant to replace it. And that raises the real question that matters here. If Iran has spent years building up its air defenses, why has none of it been able to stop an aircraft as old and as slow as the A-10? That answer is exactly what we are breaking down next. Here's something most people never stop to think about. Iran has spent billions of dollars building up its air defense network, layers of radar, missile systems, and detection equipment meant to protect its skies. And yet, against this one specific aircraft, almost none of it actually works the way it needs to. That sounds strange at first, so let's break down exactly why. Most modern air defense systems are built to catch fast, high-flying threats. Think fighter jets moving at high speed, cruise missiles screaming in from far away, or aircraft flying at altitudes where radar has a clean, wide view of the sky. Iran's defense network, much of it built or upgraded with help from Russia and China, is designed around exactly that kind of threat picture. The A-10 breaks that entire model. It flies low, sometimes just a few hundred feet off the ground. It flies slow compared to modern fighters. And it uses terrain, hills, valleys, and low-altitude cover to stay hidden from radar systems that are built to scan wide, open skies for fast movers. A plane flying low and slow does not fit the pattern these systems are trained to catch. It is like setting up cameras to catch someone running through your front yard, while someone else calmly walks in through a side door you never bothered to watch. This is not a new idea in military thinking. It goes back decades to the entire reason the A-10 was designed the way it was in the first place. During the Cold War, this aircraft was built specifically to survive against Soviet-style air defenses, flying low, using ground cover, staying hard to track, and relying on heavy armor to survive whatever did get through. Every single design choice on this plane, the shape, the armor, the low-altitude handling, was built around beating exactly the kind of air defense setup that countries like Iran still rely on today. But the Warthog does not do this job completely alone, and that is an important detail people often miss. Before any A-10 gets anywhere near a target, other aircraft go in first to clear the way. This is called suppression of enemy air defenses, and it usually starts with specialized aircraft hunting for radar sites and jamming or destroying them before they ever get a clean shot at anything flying overhead. Once those radar sites go dark or get knocked out, the airspace essentially opens up, creating a safe lane for slower aircraft like the A-10 to move through without getting picked off early. On top of that, escort fighters typically fly cover during these missions, watching for any attempt by Iranian aircraft or remaining defense systems to interfere. This is the boring but essential part of the whole operation that never makes the headlines. Nobody makes exciting highlight videos out of radar jamming aircraft or escort fighters flying quiet patterns overhead. But without that layer of support working first, the Warthog strike never happened safely in the first place. Put all of this together and you get a real capability gap, not because Iran's military is incompetent, but because its entire air defense strategy was never built to handle this specific kind of threat. It was built to stop missiles and fast jets coming from far away, not a slow-moving, heavily armored gunship sneaking in low with a full support package clearing the way in front of it. This is exactly why Iran has struggled to respond effectively. You cannot fix a gap like this overnight. Rebuilding an entire air defense doctrine around low-altitude threats takes years of investment, testing, and training, not something that happens in the middle of an active conflict. So, for now, Iran is stuck facing a threat its own systems were never designed to catch, and that gap is not closing anytime soon. Which brings us to the bigger question hanging over all of this. If Iran genuinely cannot stop these kinds of strikes, what happens next? And how does the rest of the region respond to a fight that keeps tilting further in one direction? Something interesting always happens when one country tries to look powerful and ends up doing the exact opposite. That is exactly what is playing out here, because instead of scaring off American allies in the region, Iran's missile launch appears to be pushing more of them closer to Washington instead. Regional partners, who have historically preferred to stay on the sidelines, are now showing far more willingness to get directly involved. Reports out of the Gulf describe growing coordination between American forces and partner nations, with shared intelligence, shared airspace planning, and in some cases, direct joint operations happening in the same strike windows. But countries that used to quietly stay out of these conflicts are now openly picking a side, and it is clearly not Iran's side. This matters because Iran's entire strategy for years has depended on regional neighbors staying nervous and neutral. As long as Gulf states worried more about upsetting Iran than about openly working with America, Iran kept a kind of quiet leverage over the whole region. But a failed missile attack followed by a visible, effective American counterstrike changes that calculation fast. Nothing pushes hesitant partners off the fence quite like watching one side's attack fail completely while the other side's response actually works. At the same time, Iran's options at the negotiating table keep shrinking. Iranian officials have made it clear for months that almost everything is open for discussion except one specific thing: control over the Strait of Hormuz. This narrow stretch of water is one of the most important oil routes on the entire planet, and Iran has treated it as its one untouchable bargaining chip, the thing it refuses to give ground on no matter what else gets discussed. But here is the problem with that plan. You cannot fire missiles at American forces, watch every single one get intercepted, then absorb an effective counterstrike, and still expect to keep the same leverage you had before any of this started. Leverage is not something that survives a failed attack untouched. Every missile that gets shot down, every supply site that gets hit, chips away at Iran's actual bargaining position in real time, whether Iranian officials want to admit that publicly or not. This creates what really amounts to a fork in the road for Iran right now. One path leads toward some kind of quiet de-escalation, backing away from further strikes, opening the door to renewed talks, and accepting a weaker negotiating position than it had before this all started. The other path leads toward continued escalation, more attacks, more counterstrikes, and a steadily shrinking list of options as more regional players align against it, and its proxy networks keep absorbing damage they cannot easily replace. Neither path is particularly good for Iran, and that is exactly the trap it has built for itself. Escalating further risks, accelerating the same coalition-building trend that is already working against it, but backing down risks looking weak at home, at a moment when internal pressure and economic strain are already serious problems for the regime. What happens next likely depends on how much more damage Iran's proxy networks can absorb before supply lines and staging areas become too degraded to sustain further attacks. It also depends on how far regional partners are willing to go in supporting continued operations, and whether Iran's leadership decides quiet de-escalation is a smaller cost than continuing down a path that keeps failing publicly. One thing is clear either way. A missile attack meant to project strength ended up exposing a real weakness instead, and a slow, old aircraft that Congress has tried to retire for 20 years just reminded everyone why some tools never really go out of style. So here is the real question worth sitting with. Does Iran quietly pull back and accept a weaker hand, or does it keep pushing forward into a fight its own defenses were never built to win? Make sure you are subscribed, because whichever direction this goes, the next update is coming soon, and this story is nowhere near finished.